this amendment clarifies what I believe Chairwoman Click has been saying about this bill, which is medical professionals who are intentionally prescribing medication for the purposes of an abortion. However, this bill has intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly. So if any of you find yourself in a criminal court on a jury, here's what you're going to hear about the descriptions of intentionally, knowingly, and recklessly. And so I am going to give you the egg hypothetical. So when you go in for jury selection, you'll be prepared. So let's say that you are in home ec and you are in high school being given that class where you have an egg that is a child that you are supposed to care for, and you carry around that egg. If I have that egg and I'm supposed to care for this egg, and I take that egg and what did I just do? You saw my body, I threw down the egg, I stomped on the egg, and that would be an example of intentional conduct of which you could believe and prove. Now let's say that I have the egg and I want to play toss with Representative Lozano with the egg. And I say, look, this is my baby egg. Be very careful, okay? But let's play catch with it. Ready? And I toss the egg and I say, awesome, toss it back. Great. And then I say, hey, go a step further. Ready? And I toss the egg and he drops it. Again, now I have knowingly engaged in conduct that has resulted in an outcome that I should have anticipated. But let's say that I have my egg and I have it in the passenger seat of my car and I buckle it in and I'm driving down the street and the car in front of me slams on brakes and I slam on brakes and the egg pops out of the seatbelt, rolls to the floor and breaks. That is recklessly. Currently in this bill, you want to make physicians a state jail felon for putting the egg in the passenger seat or playing toss, as opposed to the intentional conduct of taking the egg, slamming it on the floor, and then stomping to make sure that they get the result they want. I do not believe that this is really what we want to do with medical professionals. And look at the bill in total. Methotrexate. That is a medication that is used for rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis. And so are we really going to say that for rheumatoid arthritis that can come on between the ages of 30 and 50, for a physician who could be a dermatologist, a general practitioner, or maybe an OB-GYN, that they prescribe methotrexate to somebody of childbearing years, that if it happens to result in abortion, that you want them to go to state prison for 6 months to 2 years. It is why I am asking that you cut out these additional criminal terms, and if the intention is for intentional conduct, then just say it. Intentionally. Please take out the knowingly or reckless standard, which may catch up a lot of medical professionals that you don't claim to be trying to put in prison.
Mr.
Please.
Speaker,
Ms. Weiner, for what purpose?
will the gentlewoman yield for a question?
The lady yields for questions?
Yes.
She yields.
Thank you so much for laying out those difference in standards, Representative Johnson. And I fully take to heart your point about how this might impact physicians. But I also wanted to bring your attention to another section of the bill. This is on page 5. This new language would read, a person may not knowingly provide an abortion-inducing drug to a pregnant woman for the purpose of inducing an abortion in the pregnant woman or enabling another person to induce an abortion in the pregnant woman unless, and then there's a very long section of unlesses. But long story short, we're reading that with this new definition of provide that includes gifting or any type of transfer of possession. I'm concerned that this could potentially impact somebody's grandmother. You know, their grandmother leaving their prescription out for rheumatoid arthritis, knowing that they have a pregnant grandchild, thinking about options. Could they potentially be caught under these standards as well?
The standard as it applies to the criminal code, where it says that an offense under this section is intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, then yes, you have all three provisions. It also looks like, and I will ask the bill author to tell me if I'm wrong, but you also have sections in this code that apply to CVS, to manufacturers, to any form of delivery, physicians, and any person. Again, when we use the term any person, it applies to everybody. Now, why I have used our medical professionals as an example of where you are going to catch up a lot of folks who are prescribing these medications that you are specifically now saying is some kind of criminal conduct, when it can be used for psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, or any other causes, that you may be getting an unintended criminal consequence. And so I agree with you. I think the analysis, the breadth of all the people, including any person, of course, that would be the concern. Would it be reckless for your grandmother to have her rheumatoid arthritis medication in her cabinet if somebody comes over and it is taken by somebody for the intent of them having an abortion? Could you prosecute their grandmother for having their rheumatoid arthritis medication? I think these are the kinds of questions we should be asking, and if you don't want those hypotheticals or scenarios, cut out these two excessive terms, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree that if we are going to have these very intense criminal provisions, that they should at least be limited to intentionally.
Correct. And you can do that where you want to do it, right? We have strict liability statutes, but I'm not hearing that with what Chairwoman Click has said. She has said, and they've talked about the intentional act of trying to have an abortion. If that's truly the intent, the intentional act, then just say intentional. Adding in these extra terms, intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly, actually catches up a lot of conduct you don't seem to be describing, and this would clarify it. And state jail is 6 months to 2 years day for day. So this is prison. Move adoption.
The chair recognizes Ms. Click in opposition to the amendment.
Members, I respectfully ask for you to vote no on this amendment. Doctors shouldn't practice recklessly. And by removing that language, that's what I believe that this amendment will do.
Ms. Johnson, for what purpose?
Will the gentlelady yield for questions?
Will the gentlelady yield for questions?
Yes.
She yields.
Again, Representative Click, you did not hold any hearings to give medical professionals the opportunity to come forward and talk about all the manners of ways in which they might prescribe these medications and be caught up in the reckless definition.
Actually, we did during the first regular session, and we did have medical professionals that came and testified. Additionally, the Senate had 3 hearings on this bill.
And so did physicians tell you that they support or do not support this legislation?
I have talked to many physicians that do support this legislation.
And as you can imagine, we have heard from countless physicians, medical associations that disagree with this legislation. If your purpose is for the intentional act, would you also recognize that OB-GYNs use, and I know you've stated this before, but use some of these medications that you listed, such as treating ectopic pregnancies, spontaneous miscarriage, and potentially those uses could fall, or could they not fall, in reckless or knowingly?
I'm sorry, could you state that again?
The concern would be that physicians and OB-GYNs prescribe these medications for other conditions. We've talked about psoriasis,
Correct.
rheumatoid arthritis. There are other reasons, but OB-GYNs may use them for treating ectopic pregnancies and spontaneous miscarriages.
Yes, and it's usually a single drug, not the 2-drug combination.
So your bill is only intended to apply to these drugs when used for an elective abortion only, correct?
Correct.
And if so, would you be comfortable again with this amendment, which highlights that that intention is criminalized, but any other conduct like tossing the egg but not intending for it to fall and harm it, for putting it in a safety seat and having it in a seatbelt, but when it pops out and falls and breaks, that those two definitions of knowingly and reckless extend to conduct which may be outside the bounds of actually performing an elective abortion?
You know, again, Representative, I am very concerned about eliminating the word reckless. I don't think doctors should practice recklessly.
But so again, you're talking about a medical board decision, and what I'm asking is to consider, and I love that Dr. Oliverson is next to you, and I know he's a wonderful anesthesiologist, but I'm standing here from the criminal world. And I'm standing here to say, from the criminal world context, you now brought my book in. You brought in my book, prosecution, defense, and that doctors can go to prison. And I'm letting you know, while you say you don't want medical professionals to treat people recklessly, you're talking about a medical definition, and I'm asking you to please consider you are now bringing in a criminal law definition that if a physician prescribes the pill for something else and it results in this outcome, there's conduct-based, result-based, and outcomes.
It wouldn't apply if they're prescribing it for another indication.
You're shaking your head, and I get that you're shaking your head, but I'm telling you, you're not a prosecutor. You're not going to make that filing decision. So if you don't want a prosecutor to make that filing decision, don't give them the tool. Keep it as intentional. I get that you're shaking your head, and I appreciate it, but it's just like we've talked about other crimes where you would say, there's no way somebody's going to charge that. I'm asking you to consider, I promise you, someone will charge this, and you will have a physician that will get charged, and it won't matter. We won't get to play Dr. Oliverson shaking his head no for the jury. If you don't want it to happen, and you really only want it to apply to intentional conduct of establishing an elective abortion, then just say intentional. But when you play with reckless and knowing in the criminal world, I just don't want you to be shocked when you have medical professionals that are getting prosecuted and trying to be sent to prison for prescribing methotrexate.
And again, knowingly and recklessly providing an elective abortion. Do you think that it's okay for a provider to knowingly and recklessly provide an elective abortion?
I'm going to ask for some help from some other criminal law folks in here, because you have results-oriented offenses that if the prescription is for something else, but it can result in the outcome you don't want, but that wasn't the intent, then it's reckless. So I agree with you on what you're saying, but I believe what you're saying is intentional, which is I'm prescribing it with the intent that it results in an abortion. And I'm warning that you might have the prescription for some other purpose that results in the abortion, and somebody could prosecute that under your analysis of reckless. And so that's why I'm asking you to consider taking out knowing and reckless, or at least for this body to vote down the analysis of knowing and reckless. Again, you're talking about intentional. And I would ask you to consider that if the result is an abortion and the prescription is for some other purpose, I believe it fits into the criminal definition of reckless, and that may not be what you want.
The chair recognizes Ms. Johnson to close on the amendment.
Members, please. Please. We keep hitting the buttons and they keep going on party line. And I understand that Chairwoman Click cannot accept this amendment for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean you have to vote against it. Because if you really believe the intentional act of inducing an abortion is what you want, then this bill, this amendment doesn't change it. This amendment just says cut out knowingly and reckless so you don't catch up medical professionals or other people in a mistake. So please support the amendment. Thank you.
The question occurs on adoption of the amendment. A record of vote has been requested by Ms. Weiner. The clerk ring the bell. So Ms. Johnson Paris voting aye. Ms. Click voting nay. Ms. Noble voting nay. Have all members voted? There being 44 ayes and 81 nays, the amendment fails to adopt.